Arts of the Neoclassic and Romantic Periods in Grade 9 Third Quarter.
A pleasant day, Grade 9 students! It's me, Ma'am Chona, your arts teacher. And we are on the third quarter of art subject. Now, we will going to discover the history of Neoclassic and Romantic periods, the famous artists and their famous works. For the history of the neoclassical art, neoclassicism is a revival of the classical past. The movement began around the middle of the 18th century, marking a time in art's history when artists began to imitate Greek and Roman antiquity and the artists of the Renaissance. Apart from the Diderot, other art critics desired a better kind of art that followed the styles of past masters. Many artists began to study Greek architecture and create classically inspired works of art. In 1738, excavations of Pompeii and Herculaneum led to the finding of well-preserved, colorful paintings, mosaics, and pottery. These discoveries only fueled artistic fascination and curiosity for antiquity, and artists began to use this new knowledge of the past in their art, creating their own, new, classical style that was extremely different from the Rococo. Rococo is a style popular during the early to mid-18th century. The use of strict horizontal vertical lines, clearly seen in Oedipus' stance, is a very important neoclassical characteristic that helps create a harmonious and balanced composition. True ingress image of Oedipus does not portray the idealized human from essential to classicism. His depiction of the male figure agrees with Winckelmann's idea of imperfect nature. One of the most famous English ceramic manufacturers of the 18th century founded the Wedgwood Company in 1759, which produced classically inspired jasperware, creamware, and black basalt, formed using simple geometric lines and decorated with frieze-like scenes reminiscent of ancient Greek and Roman pottery. Neoclassicism was also an important movement in America. The United States modeled itself on the ancient civilizations of Rome and Greece, both architecturally and politically. Neoclassical ideals flowed freely in the newly formed republic, and classically inspired buildings and monuments were erected. Washington, D.C. is still decorated with this white marble, facades, imitations of antiquity, and portraits of presidents sculpted in the manner of Roman emperors and glorified in colossal monuments. The first artist is Jacques-Louis David, and he was the 19th century painter who is considered to be the principal proponent of the neoclassical style. And one of his most famous works is include The Death of Marat, and it is a portrays the famous French revolutionary figure dead in his boat after an assassination.
David's revolutionary inspiration is ultimately best represented by The Death of Marat, painted in 1793, soon after the murder of revolutionary leader Jean-Paul Marat. This so-called pit of the revolution is considered David's masterpiece. As one modern critic put it, the piece is a moving testimony to what can be achieved when an artist's political convictions are directly manifested in his work. Marat became an instant political martyr, while the painting became a symbol of sacrifice in the name of the Republic. Next of his famous artwork is the Napoleon Crossing the Alps. It's a series of 5 oil-on-canvas equestrian portraits of Napoleon Bonaparte painted by the French artist Jacques-Louis David between 1801 and 1805. Initially commissioned by the King of Spain, the composition shows a strongly idealized view of the real crossing that Napoleon and his army made across the Alps through the Grate of St. Bernard Pass in May 1800s.
Napoleon initially requested to be shown reviewing the troops, but eventually decided on a scene showing him crossing the Alps. In reality, the crossing had been made in the fine weather, and Bonaparte had been led across by a guide a few days after the troops mounted on a mule. However, from the outset, the painting was first and foremost propaganda, and Bonaparte asked David to portray him calm, mounted on a fiery steed. And it is probable that he also suggested the addition of the names of the other great generals who had led their forces across the Alps: Hannibal and Charlemagne. Next famous artist is Jean-Auguste Dominic. He is a painter and icon of cultural conservatism. In 19th century France, Ingres became the principal proponent of French neoclassical painting after the death of his mentor. Jacques-Louis David, his cool, meticulously drawn works constituted the stylistic antithesis of the emotionalism and colorism of contemporary Romantic school. As a monumental history painter, Ingres sought to perpetuate the classical tradition of Raphael and Nicolas Poussin. The spatial and anatomical distortions that characterize his portraits and nudes, however, anticipate many of the most audacious formal experiments of 20th century modernism. One of his famous artwork is the Grande Odalisque. Grande Odalisque is also known to La Grande Odalisque. It's an oil painting of 181400s by Jean-Auguste Dominic Ingres depicting an odalisque, or concubine. Ingres' contemporaries consider the work to signify Ingres' break from neoclassicism, indicating a shift toward exotic romanticism. Next famous work of Dominic is the Apotheosis of Homer. It is the symmetrical composition depicts Homer being crowned by a winged figure personifying victory or the universe. 44 additional figures pay homage to the poet in a kind of classical confession of faith. Next of his famous artwork is The Source. It's an oil painting on canvas by French neoclassical painter Jean-Auguste Dominic Ingres. The work was begun in Florence around 1820s and not completed until 1856 in Paris when Ingres completed The Source. He was 76 years old, already famous and president of the École des Beaux Arts. The pose of the nude may be compared with that of another by Ingres, the Venus Anadyomene, on 1848, and is reimagination of the Aphrodite of Cnidus or Venus Boudica. Two of Ingres' students, painters Paul Balse and Alexandre Desgoffe, helped to create the background and water jar. Next famous artist is Francisco Goya. He's a Spanish artist whose paintings, drawings, and engraving reflected contemporary historical upheavals and influenced important 19th and 20th century painters. The series of etchings, The Disasters of War, records the horrors of the Napoleonic invasion. His masterpieces in painting include the Naked Maha, the Clothed Maha, and the 3rd of May 1800s in Madrid of the executions. Famous work is the Clothed Maha. It's a pendant painting by the Spanish painter Francisco de Goya between 1800s and 1805. It is a clothed version of earlier La Maja de Sunda and is exhibited next to it in the same room at the Prado Museum in Madrid. The word Maja is the feminine form of Majo. A low-class Spaniard of the 18th and 19th century, the model is identifiable as a Maja by her costume, but her identity is not known. It has been suggested that she looks like Godoy's mistress Pepita or Tudor. Next of his famous work is the Naked Maha, an image of Venus in the nude, lying on a green velvet divan with pillows and a spread. It is said to be the first painting in which female pubic hair is visible, making it totally profane at the time. The identity of the model in the image is under debate, with some art historians thinking the model was the mistress of Prime Minister Manuel de Godoy, who commissioned the paintings, or that it was Goya's mistress. Many art historians agree that the model was a compilation of many female figures. In 1913, the Spanish Inquisition confiscated both of the paintings as obscene, returning them to the Academy of Fine Arts in 1936. After Goya's death in the 1930s, Spain issued postage stamps with the image of the Maha, and subsequently all men bearing the stamps were denied entrance into the United States. Next of his famous work is the 3rd of May 1808. The painting's content, presentation, and emotional force secure its status as a groundbreaking, archetypal image of the horrors of war. Although it draws on many sources from both high and popular art, the 3rd of May 1808 marks a clear break from convention, diverging from the traditions of Christian art and traditional depictions of war. It has no distinct precedent and is acknowledged as one of the first paintings of the modern era. According to the art historian Kenneth Clark, the 3rd of May 1808 is the first great picture which can be called revolutionary in every sense of the word, in style, in subject, and intention. Now let's proceed to the history of the Romantic period. Romanticism, also known as the Romantic era, was an artistic, literary, musical, and intellectual movement that originated in Europe towards the end of 18th century, and in most areas was at its peak in the approximate period from 1800s to 1850. Romanticism was characterized by its emphasis on emotion and individualism, as well as glorification of all the past and nature. Preferring the medieval rather than the classical, it was partly a reaction to the Industrial Revolution, the social and political norms of the Age of Enlightenment, and the scientific rationalization of nature. All components of modernity, it was embodied most strongly in the visual arts, music, and literature, but had a major impact on historiography, education, chess, social sciences, and natural sciences.
In the visual arts, Romanticism first showed itself in landscape painting, where from as early as the 1760s, British artists began to turn to wildered landscapes and storms, and Gothic architecture, even if they had to make do with Wales as a setting. Caspar David Friedrich and J.M.W. Turner were born less than a year apart in 1774 and 1775, respectively, and were to take German and English landscape painting to their extremes of Romanticism, but both their artistic sensibilities were formed when forms of Romanticism was already strongly present in art. John Constable, born in 1776, stayed closer to the English landscape tradition, but in his largest six-footers insisted on the heroic status of a patch of the working countryside where he had grown up, challenging the traditional hierarchy of genres, which relegated landscape painting to a low status. Turner also painted very large landscapes and above all seascapes.
So the characteristic of the Romantic art is that it focuses on emotions, feelings, and moods of all kinds, including spirituality, imagination, mystery, and fervor. The subject matter varied widely, including landscape, religion, revolution, and peaceful beauty. The brushwork for Romantic art became looser and less precise. The great Romantic artist Caspar David Friedrich summed up Romanticism saying, "The artist's feeling is his law." Goya is also one of an observer of contemporary society and recorded the sense of anxiety caused by Spain's moral and political crisis in the closing years of the 18th century. He also portrayed with dexterity the picturesque quality and gaiety of the life of Madrid's Majas, the religious life of the people, and the agitation for progress and technology. Goya achieved his first success as a young artist by painting various forms of Spanish popular entertainment. His colorful designs for tapestries, for instance, showed a local beauty under a parasol, a game of blind men's buff, and the dance on blanks of the Manzanares, These works were painted for an aristocracy who, determined to keep French influence at bay, were becoming nationally self-aware and developing a taste for folk culture. One of his famous artworks during Romantic period is the Great Goat. This is one of 8 paintings commissioned by the Duchess of Osuna for her country house at Alameda. The subject, similar to that of etching number 60 of Los Caprichos, enabled Goya to combine his flair for fantasy with savage attacks on the church's abuses and exploitation of superstitions and fears, which were deeply rooted in the popular imagination. Next of his famous artwork is the Burial of the Sardine. A surging mass of people gathers under a February sky, men, women, and children, most of them masked or at least disguised, crowd around 4 dancing figures. 3 in white, the 4th dressed as a ball in that mask. The figures appear to dance in step, some with arms raised, graceful move above their heads, others gesticulating wildly. They have no need of accompaniment, there is no sign of a guitar. The rhythm is marked by the clatter of castanets and stamping feet, and by the clapping and snapping figures of the spectators. The scene has an air of improvisation, as if a group of people had decided quite spontaneously to perform a folk dance or some form of hilarious grotesquerie, perhaps the caricature of Squidilla, hardly surprising in a land where every little girl, according to local legend, is born dancing. There was dancing at every occasion in Spain, even at the most important religious festivals.
A person who had committed a heinous crime or died a violent death did not, according to popular belief, find everlasting peace, but returned as a ghost to haunt the living. Masks and painted faces were worn to wear them off. Death masks with hollow eyes steer from Goya's crowd, while the word mortus death can be made out, admittedly with some difficulty on the dark banner above them. Carnival was not originally a festival of joy. The bear was usually accompanied by the figure of a huntsman. However, the most tattooed figure with lowered lance joining the dancers may be the partner of the black ball in this folk dance. His costume, with a black broad-brimmed hat, leather trousers, and embroidered sleeveless waistcoat, is reminiscent of the traditional suits worn by picadors in Goya's renderings of bullfights. The spectators at the Burial of the Sardine were also those who thronged to the arena for bullfights.
Next famous artist during Romantic period is Eugène Delacroix. He is known as one of the most influential figures in art of his time, creator of famous works such as La Liberté Guidant le Peuple, or Liberty Leading the People, and La Mort de Sardanapale, the Death of Sardanapalus. Delacroix is synonymous with the Romantic era of French art in the 19th century. Artworks is The Liberty Leading the People, is a painting personifying the concept of liberty, leads a varied group of people forward over a barricade and the bodies of the fallen. Holding the flag of the French Revolution, the tricolor, which again became France's nation flag after these events, in one hand, and brandishing a bayonet musket with the other. The figure of liberty is also viewed as a symbol of France and the French Republic known as Marianne. The painting is often confused for depicting the French Revolution of 1789. The fighters are formed a mixture of social classes ranging from the bourgeoisie, represented by the young man in a top hat, a student from the prestigious École Polytechnique wearing the traditional bihom, to the revolutionary in worker, as exemplified by the body holding pistols. What they have in common is the fierceness and determination in their eyes. Aside from the flag held by Liberty, a second mini tricolor can be discerned in the distance, flying from the towers of the Notre Dame. Next of his famous artwork is The Death of Sardanapalus, is is an oil painting on canvas by Eugene de Lacroix dated 1827. It currently hangs in the Musée de Louvre, Paris. A smaller replica painted by de Lacroix in 1844 is now in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The death of Sardanapalus is based on the tale of Sardanapalus, the last king of Assyria, from historical library of Diodorus Siculus, the ancient Greek historian, and is a work of the era of Romanticism. This painting used rich, vivid, and warm colors and broad brushstrokes. It was inspired by Lord Byron's play Sardanapalus 1821 and in turn inspired a cantata by Hector Berlioz, Sardanapale 1830, and also Franz Liszt's opera Sardanapalo. The main focus of that of the Sardanapalus is the large bed draped in rich red fabric. On it lies a man with a disinterested eye overseeing a scene of chaos. He is dressed in flowing white fabrics and sumptuous gold around his neck and head. A woman lies dead at his feet, prone across the lower half of the large bed. She is one of 6 in the scene, all in various shades of undress, and all in assorted throes of death by the hands of the whole dozen men in the scene. There are several people being stabbed with knives, and one man is dying from a self-inflicted wound from a wound, and a man in the left foreground is attempting to kill an interestedly adorned horse. A young man by the king's right elbow is standing behind a side table which has an elaborate golden decanter and a cup. There are golden elephant heads at the base of the bed, as well as various valuable trinkets scattered among the carriage. In the background, several architectural elements are visible but difficult to discern. Next famous artist is Théodore Géricault. He is a painter who exerted a seminal influence on the development of Romantic art in France. Géricault was a dandy and an avid horseman whose dramatic paintings reflect his flamboyant and passionate personality. As a student, Géricault learned the traditions of English sporting art from French painter Carly Vernet, and he developed a remarkable facility for capturing animal movement. He also mastered classicist figure construction and composition under the academician Pierre Narcisse. Baron Guerin, another student of Guerin Eugene de Lacroix, was profoundly influenced by Géricault, finding in his example a major point of departure of his own art. One of his famous artwork is the Raft of Medusa. This work depicts the aftermath of a contemporary French shipwreck whose survivors embarked on a raft and were decimated by starvation before being recused at sea. This shipwreck had scandalous political implications at home. The incompetent captain, who had gained the position because of connections to the Bourbon Restoration government, fought to save himself and senior officers while leaving the lower ranks to die. And so Géricault's picture of the raft and its inhabitants was greeted with hostility by the government. The work's macabre realism, its treatment of the raft incident as epic heroic tragedy, and the veracity of its drawing and tonalities combined to give the painting great dignity and carry if it is far beyond mere contemporary reportage. The portrayal of the dead and dying, developed within a dramatic, carefully constructed composition, addressed as contemporary subject with remarkable and unprecedented passion. The next famous artwork of Théodore Géricault is the Charging Chaucer. It's an oil painting on canvas of about 1812 by the French painter Théodore Géricault, portraying a mounted Napoleonic cavalry officer who is ready to attack. The painting was Géricault's first exhibited work, and it is an example of Géricault's attempt to condense both movement and structure in its arts. Represents French Romanticism and has a motif similar to the Jacques Louis David's Napoleon crossing the Alps, but non-classical characteristics of the picture included its dramatic diagonal arrangement and vigorous painting handling. Next of his famous artwork is the Horse Frightened by Lightning. It is an animal painting whose medium is oil canvas. Its dimensions are 48.90 cm by 60.30 cm. The painting is displayed at the By National Gallery of London, initially the painting shows a still horse that looks frightened and without a sense of belonging. The horse appears abandoned and stray. The expressions mean to say that if the horse knew its way back, it would be probably running home. In the background is the one set of torrential downpour, and the streaks of lightning are not a pleasant sight. The sky is covered with thick clouds. Horses have reduced visibility in darkness, which adds to its confusion. In the first image, the horse front legs are quite together and its posture doesn't suggest any response with emotion, hence confirming in its indecisiveness and confusion. And that is the arts of neoclassic and romantic period. Thank you for your listening, students. See you on my next video. Bye!